as a matter of policy. The Islamic nations, supported by the non-aligned movement and Russia, vowed to keep the pressure on Israel, saying the momentum should not be missed of making Israel accountable of its secretive nuclear program. This pressure is expected to continue until September, when the IAEA will meet again here in Vienna for its annual General Conference. Eva Manasieva, Press TV from the IAEA headquarters in Vienna.
Well, for more on that story, we're now joined by Kevin Sanders, the director of the War and Peace Foundation, who's joining us via satellite from New York. Mr. Sanders, thank you very much for joining our broadcast. Now let's get right into it. History shows that the League of Nations collapsed under the weight of its own contradictions and its double standards. Do you think that maybe the UN and the IAEA hearted this way as well, due to the US and EU's refusal to call out Israel while sanctioning Iran?
Well, they're suffering from all sorts of contortions. If you look at some of the statements, there are a massive intellectual contradictions and chaos. They're trying to resolve irresolvable declarations and sets of priorities. It's a very complicated situation, and the end result will be that there are so many entwining pressures around that I suspect the end result will be that not much will happen. It's interesting to see that in some ways the reactions in Israel and Iran were not dissimilar. That, for example, in Israel, the position was that the sanctions, for example, the IAEA sanctions, are so weak, so watered down, that they're not going to make any difference. And from a different perspective, Iran has been saying, yes, there are sanctions, so there have been sanctions before, we can handle it, it's not going to stop us, it's not going to make that much difference. I think in a way both are right. I don't think it is going to make much difference. I think all of these resolutions and discussions at the moment are treading water, just trying to keep things steady, avoid any kind of conflict, and I think the IAEA, for all its many faults, is playing a very skillful role here. It is in a position to, for example, step in when things become, if they become at all dangerous, and say, well, we've left this door open, and if you actually look at some of the text, these latest statements, it could be argued that the only problem comes down to a, quote, misunderstanding regarding some of Iran's equipment or materials, and surely that can be solved without some of the sanctions that are now being suggested, and certainly without any kind of invasion. I think everybody's trying to step back, cool it down, avoid any crisis. There will be perhaps some sort of sanctions, but I think that there are loopholes and doorways in that to keep it open to diplomacy when and as necessary and when and as possible.
Remaining with what you just said, the U.S. said that IAEA's mention of the Israeli nukes was untimely, uncalled for, distracting, divisive, preempting, and prejudicial. And it said a Mideast free of nukes wasn't going to happen if countries engage in name-calling. Now, isn't all of the above that the U.S. mentioned the treatment that's actually being meted out to Iran over its peaceful nuclear energy program?
Oh, yeah, the United States official position is in chaos here. They're trying to juggle so many contradictory positions. And so it's not surprising that none of this makes any kind of sense. But there are reasons for it. And I think that the fact that the NPT brought up for the first time and pushed through and insisted upon the requirement that there be a formal discussion of a nuclear-free Middle East, which is a way of saying that Israel has to get rid of its bombs, and that this has now moved into a position of prominence that has not been there before. And interestingly, even in Israel, some of the political and scientific leaders, some nuclear physicists there are saying, well, the policy of ambiguity that Israel has maintained for so long has served us well, but it's over. It's not going to work anymore. It's only going to do us harm. I mean, even that level of criticism in Israel is now coming to the fore. I think that we are moving on first tiny steps toward the long journey of a nuclear-free Middle East.
Right, now talk about a nuclear-free Middle East. Of recent, the Israeli nuke issue has united Arabs who have rallied around support for Israel to accede to the NPT and for Israel not to be allowed to continue to defy the international community any longer. Is that a significant change in the Arab stance, or is it more to quell protests from Arab citizens who are angered by Israel's continuing atrocities in places like Gaza and its untouchable status because of the United States' blind support?
Well, I think there's a feeling everywhere that Israel right now is not in a position to mount a very good defense on any of these issues. The world now has shifted to a fairly critical stance regarding Israel's recent behavior with the aid ship. And Israel has now lost about the only support it had in the region, which is from Turkey. Turkey has now moved back. So while Israel is now, Israel is not happy about the way things are going on, but there's not much it can do about it, and it's probably weaker now than it has been for many years. I think that the end result of all these pressures will be that a move, and a formal move toward a Middle East free of nuclear weapons is now inevitable. It won't happen next year, won't happen the year after, but it is beginning to happen. And I think that, for example, I think that it would be unfortunate if, as a result of what's going on now, Iran decided to pull out of the IAEA. It would be understandable, but I think unfortunate in the longer view, because the IAEA is the most substantial and truly multilateral organization involved in this, and I think that the IAEA may very well end up saving the world.
All right, well, Mr. Kevin Sanders, Director of the War and Peace Foundation, joining us there via satellite from New York. Mr.